the drama for the number 1 overall pick, well, I think many expect, including us, it's Bryce Young to the Carolina Panthers. But here's the NFL draft. There's always a reason to sell hope and a reason to sell uncertainty. And that certainly is the case with the Houston Texans at number 2. Look how much the odds have flipped for the number 2 overall selection, according to Las Vegas, which for months was either C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. The odds-on favorite for the number 2 pick now, Chad, is Will Levis at -140, followed by Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, the 2 pass rushers, before you get to C.J. Stroud for the Houston Texans. And I'm surprised. For the life of me, I can't explain this because it just doesn't make sense to me. And here's why. The idea that Levis, well, he did less, but he didn't have an offensive line. And the run game wasn't the same because Chris Rodriguez was out. And, well, they had different offensive coordinators.
Excuses.
Wide receivers went to the NFL. That's all true. But then on the same discussion about quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud, he had too much talent around him. How can you trust that? Because the wide receivers were excellent. The best wide receiver of the lot is still playing for the Buckeyes, and he'll be in the draft next year, Marvin Harrison Jr. Offensive line, putting offensive tackles into the league the last couple of years, starting on offensive lines across the league. But, Stroud just had to throw to the open man. But it's Levis that has the opposite reaction whenever we're not seeing the same type of production. I'm drafting C.J. Stroud. The Texans, if true, have overthought this. And it's a prime example of why they're the Houston Texans right now, picking number 2 overall. And they have 11 wins over the last 3 years. And they're willing to take Will Levis over C.J. Stroud. And the entire time, I understand they wanted Bryce Young. And if it's not Bryce Young at number 1, that's who they're going to select. But there's no way I'm drafting Will Levis ahead of C.J. Stroud in this draft, Chad.
Well, this is all just crazy to me that Will Levis has somehow magically jumped C.J. Stroud. Will Levis, who a week and a half ago was one of the guys that was seen as their stock was falling based on reports, that could be dropping in the first round. Now the Vegas favorite to be the number 2 overall pick. I am curious, though, with this Vegas odds, it's just to be the number 2 overall pick.
That's right.
I don't know if that means the Texans are all in on Will Levis or Vegas believes someone else is all in on Will Levis and is trading up to number 2 with the Texans, and they'll get what they want ultimately, and that is to trade out of that spot to someone who wants one of these quarterbacks, much like we were discussing on Friday. But either way, I'm with you. If it's Will Levis as the second quarterback taken in this draft, that's going to be a huge mistake for whoever does it, whether it be the Texans or a team trading up into that spot to draft second overall. I don't get it. I think whenever you're doing backflips to make excuses for someone and say, yeah, but all these things were happening, then something's going on. And when the only knock on C.J. Stroud, there's really 2 sort of knocks on him. 1, the surrounding cast was way too good, and that's why he looked as good as he did. And 2, it's that he's not a real reactionary quarterback. He's good with a plan. He's great with 1 or 2 reads, but he's not going to be great ad-libbing in an offense if things break down. I still watch Will Levis and think turnover prone. I don't see what everyone else sees in that player. And I'm not saying that I'm absolutely in love with C.J. Stroud, but turn on that tape against Georgia and tell me what there's not to like about C.J. Stroud against one of the best defenses in America this past year in a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, so Bryce Young doesn't have talent around him. Joe Burrow didn't have talent around him.
I mean, C.J. Stroud is his kicker missing a makeable field goal away from winning a national championship.
Yeah.
Because they probably go on to blow out TCU, not maybe the way Georgia did, but they're going to win that game if they can get past Georgia. So that's how close he was, with nothing to do with his play, cost him a national championship.
But also this S2 cognitive test or whatever, where you have all the lists. Like, first off, how do you know any of that's accurate? I don't know the actual company that it's doing. It's not releasing this. It's all being leaked, and it's just taken as gospel. When the quarterbacks that we aren't even discussing for the first round, there are some names on there that have scored high according to the information that's available, if you're going to take it at face value, Or is their stock rising all of a sudden because they have a great S2 score? Ryan Leaf joined us on Friday and said straight up, like, he and Peyton Manning took the Wonderlic side by side and looked at each other and they said, what the hell are we doing? Like, and they had the same score.
Yeah.
One ends up being Peyton Manning. The other one was a bust. And Ryan Leaf is the one that said that. And they had the same score. None of this ultimately matters. It comes down to rapport with the offensive coordinator and the system that you're going to, and the head coach, of course. But Chad, the fit. And whether or not that guy is a leader. And ultimately, can he ball? I've seen C.J. Stroud do that. And while I've seen elements of this with Will Levis, we've talked more about the measurables and not the intangibles. And with Stroud, I can just say, hey, watch this game. It shows you everything we need to know.
And with that S2 cognitive test, and I want to ask Hendon Hooker about this when he joins us later, because Hendon Hooker scored low on this. Mm-hmm. Bryce Young, Will Levis scored very high. Hendon Hooker was like 48, 46 percentile, something like that.
Whatever that means.
And then C.J. Stroud was like 18%. I mean, there was a big drop-off to Hooker and then a bigger drop-off to Stroud on that list. I'm with you. I don't know. I want to ask what this test was exactly. We've taken the Wonderlic. I think every media member has at some point because you get so interested in it. I don't know what this S2 cognitive test is or how it relates to a player's ability as a quarterback in the NFL, but we'll ask Hendon Hooker about it. But if this is the one reason, if Nick Caserio marked an X through C.J. Stroud because of his S2 cognitive test, then Nick Caserio thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and he's probably not. That's what I hear from that. If that's the only reason, I don't know that's the only reason, but that's the one bit of news we've gotten about C.J. Stroud, that suddenly his draft stock is supposedly tanking because he scored poorly one time on the S2 cognitive test.
And what they've done is they have created the drama necessary, the league and the ESPN, necessary to tune in to figure out what Houston's going to do at number 2. Which, by the way, if everyone believes that they're taking Bryce Young number 1, Houston can go ahead and trade out of that pick just like Chicago did a couple months ago. Because you know who's going to be there if you're buying the fact that Carolina's taking Young. And if not, if you're willing to take Young, you stay there. But Houston wouldn't trade the pick if Bryce Young were going to be available.
If Houston trades out, in the next couple days leading up to the draft, I think will be the aha moment on the Vegas suddenly favoring Will Levis that extremely to be the number 2 overall pick. That they caught wind of something. Vegas always knows, at least we believe that. And if they do in this situation, it's because they caught wind of someone trading up to get Levis.
I just don't know how Vegas knows in this case this far in advance for that, when this is the season of lies across the league and posturing and deception with what teams actually want to do. Hit us up with your thoughts. You can join us in the chat on YouTube. Just search out OutKick. We hope you'll subscribe, like, and share while you're there. Chad, the NBA's gotten a lot of wrong recently in recent seasons. Jalen Rose continues to show us how it's done. I'm a good example of the casual sports fan for the NBA. Without a home market team, I'm looking for the trash talk. I'm all for the suspensions we've seen recently, the controversy. And guess what? None of that came with any political standing or grandstanding for any specific side or difference of opinion. It was all taking place on the court and the rivalries and the trash talk that we saw this weekend. But Jalen Rose, as a part of all that coverage, jumps on his podcast in reaction to Phil Jackson, speaking in regards to exactly what I'm saying, where they've gotten a lot wrong in recent years, the league has, and responds by saying, well, this is also the coach that got rich off the play of the great players around him, and insinuating certain things more than deliberately saying it, and becoming a headline once again. During a time where the league doesn't need the off-the-court battling back and forth on racism, activism, or which page LeBron James is reading on a Malcolm X book.
Yeah, Phil Jackson basically said, I lost a lot of interest in the NBA during the bubble year, during the COVID year, in the bubble, because it was all the, end racism and justice for all. And
Names
all
on the back were
names on the back were changed
Right.
and everything else. And he's like, I just, I want the NBA to be about the basketball and not political activism. I completely agree. I've got a very consistent stance on this. If I run a league, if you name Chad Withrow commissioner of your sports league, here's my solemn promise to you as a sports league. I will stand for, wait for it, the sport. I'll stand for the league. That's what we stand for if I'm commissioner of your league. It's about the competition. It's about the players, the coaches. It's about the sport. It's not about political activism. We stand for nothing other than the NBA if I'm the NBA commissioner. Now, I'm not trying to squash political activism altogether. If you as an individual want to be politically active, that is your right as an American citizen. You can do it. I just finished a documentary on Bill Russell. He found tons of ways to be politically active. I didn't see him doing a lot in a Boston Celtics uniform when he was playing in the NBA. Would he not stay in a hotel that would only serve whites when he had an exhibition game in Lexington, Kentucky? He didn't. And guess what? His teammates wouldn't stay there either. And they went home and didn't play the game. You can be politically active. You can take a stand for something. I'm not trying to squash that out of the individual. But when leagues take the torch and become overly political and try to become political activists, it only serves to hurt the overall product of the league. And this is what a very smart basketball man and Phil Jackson is saying. And Jalen Rose can say what he wants about him making all that money off the backs of African-American players over the course of his time. Phil Jackson knows basketball, and he knows what he likes in the game of basketball. And what that is the game of basketball. That's what most sports fans like. They like the sport. They like the competition. They like the talent on display on the court at all times. So what Phil Jackson is saying is totally not controversial at all. But for some reason, Jalen Rose feels like everything that goes against even partially his political activism or his side is somehow is an affront to him as a man and to every black person on the planet. That's not what Phil Jackson is saying. He wants it to be about the basketball and not about changing the names on the back of the jersey and all that. Fine with that opinion. It's an opinion, just like Jalen Rose's. But the problem is too many people believe you can have one opinion and not another in this country. And I am of the opinion, if I'm watching a sport, that it's about the sport I'm watching and nothing else in that moment. I'm not going to get mad at anyone that wants to be politically active as an individual on their own time. This is not a shut up and dribble stance. It's I watch the basketball game to watch guys dribble. That's it. And if you're Phil Jackson or me or anyone else that has that opinion and you think I would like to watch it for the sport alone, you're not wrong in having that opinion.
And guess what this weekend and this last week and a half have been about for the NBA? The sport.
The basketball. And the nut shots. That's part of it, too.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't also say there was a little bit about the foul play going on in some of these games with cheap shots.
Yeah, but it had nothing to do with controversy off the court. I mean, it's more about the old school mentality and whether or not it was dirty play.
Right.
Which drew
a little bit of controversy that way is good on the court.
Which drew into a reason to actually watch the sport, instead of the post-game presser. But the post-game presser with LeBron was awesome. The pre-game warm-up with LeBron and Dylan Brooks. Whenever they got face-to-face, when LeBron confronted him pre-game, ball game, done. With Brooks just standing there and LeBron saying, he's like, hey, there was nothing private about it. It was very public. That's how I like it. You could tell LeBron was telling him, hey, you woke up the dog. And while LeBron was fine, the Lakers came out, and the way it was described by Doug Gottlieb this morning on Dan Dockich and Don't At Me was, for really the first time, L.A. became a huge LeBron fan instead of LeBron playing for Kobe's team in that moment. That's an interesting way to put it. But the post game, you want to talk about the groin shot by Dylan Brooks where he's out, but he's not going to be suspended. I mean, the groin shot came from LeBron James and the Lakers in Game 3 with a 2-1 series lead and how they handled them.
And it was exactly what I feared, and I said the day after Dylan Brooks started running his mouth after that win was, this is not a bear you poke. I know he had the line about, I don't poke bears. You got to drop 40 on me before I pay you any respect.
Yeah.
Well, you poked a pretty big bear in LeBron James. He's the NBA's all-time leading scorer. that you've awoken now, and now you're down
The whole team woke up, though.
2-1 in the series. Yes, he woke up everyone. If you want to do that up 3-0 or after you win the series, have at it. I love it because it's going to add to next season's drama. But from a competitive standpoint, I don't know that what Dillon Brooks did was the smartest. I love it from an entertainment standpoint. I love Dillon Brooks for doing it because now I'm even more into this series. But I don't know that he did his teammates any favors when he poked LeBron James the way he did.
Literally and
and
figuratively.
LeBron, yeah. Well, that poke was a little different than the poke he made, the verbal jab after the game.
You think it was intentional?
Did I think it was intentional?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, it was like
I know.
What's the capital of Thailand?
Well, the basketball
type joke. That's what he did. And that's
it's a very opportunistic chance taken there.
Yeah.
And I mean, Dillon Brooks. I mean, they're too little, too late at that point with the score.
Just be careful what you wish for because
Amen.
LeBron right now looks like he's going into dad mode, and he's asserting himself as the father of Dillon Brooks in these games.
Agreed.
And Dillon Brooks, in a typical little brother or son move, resorted to the one thing that the weaker person can do in a fight, and that is to hit the genitalia of the person on top of them.
But the fact
and
is
that's
he
exactly
did it,
what he did in that game.
I actually don't want Dillon Brooks to stop.
Just more cheap shots?
Yes. I mean, LeBron was like, hey, I've been here and done that. Like, I've had people try to rattle me. This is not my first rodeo.
Well, the only thing that's going to be fun now about this series, though, is if Dillon Brooks has a counter.
I know.
The Grizzlies have to win.
Really, the best.
If they come out and win tonight and it's 2-2,
right,
and he's talking trash, then it's okay. Now, what's going to happen in Game 5? But if they go out and get curb stomped
I know.
in L.A., then that's not going to be good.